Hey guys, that time of the week again. AB, welcome
Hey.
back to another skills workshop, episode 41, coming to you live every Friday morning, giving you skills, tips, tricks, hacks, everything that we see around the grounds. And AB, auction season has now officially begun.
Sure
It's been
has.
happening for a couple of weeks. And
Yes.
on the weekend, we were just discussing before we recorded this episode about what we experienced on the weekend with the auctions that we conducted. And the one thing I want to kind of emphasise about this episode is, regardless whether it's an auction, private sale, private treaty campaign, I want you to remember that serving the customer and that customer experience, creating a revenue found, is obviously paramount to the success of every campaign. Now, that's kind of obvious. We've spoken about that a lot. We've spoken about that at Kickstarts. But I want to emphasise it because what we experienced on the weekend, we experienced kind of different scenarios, but similar strategies from agents that were willing to go the extra mile to get the best possible result for their owners.
That's right. And I think the examples we're going to provide you today, I feel are quite an accurate barometer or yardstick, if you like, of what's happening throughout the network or what we can expect to happen in your own marketplace. So Troy, I'll ask you how your auction as an auctioneer that you called on Saturday, how it was, and we'll use that as a case study for learning, and then I'll talk to you about the two that I had, which were quite the dichotomy of one extreme to the other. So let's learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one example that I'm going to mention is a property that I sold on behalf of Wayne and Tina Vaughan, and congratulations to Wayne and Tina and the entire team out of the Epping office. They had 4 from 4 on the weekend.
Terrific.
And in most circumstances, there was one bidder auctions, and in particular mine was a one bidder auction. And the thing that I noticed, Wayne and Tina are phenomenal at the way they work a crowd, and they have authentic conversations on the floor. The one thing that I noticed from Wayne and Tina is the calmness and the approach that they have when they're talking to those buyers. And now the scenario played out that they had multiple people on that property. Given individual circumstances, 1 or 2 of those people that did indicate interest, they weren't in a position to formally register. So there was one active bidder during the course of the auction. We opened the auction up. We extracted a bid from that party to start the auction with Wayne and Tina having that conversation, and then negotiated on the floor to a level that the vendors were willing to accept. Now the vendors were also interstate. They'd already moved interstate. So the conversation and the way that Wayne and Tina both assisted and helped, right? So the 2 words, assisted and helped, not manage the expectation, but not to a point that they felt like they were influencing the decision. They assisted and helped and showed the value of what was happening during the auction floor, made a significant difference. Now, what that means to everyone watching this video, how do you do that? Well, I think it comes from a place of expectation up front. By having the authentic conversation and telling them the scenario before it plays out, because that buyer did know that they were the only person that was formally registered during the course of the auction, and they knew that they were in a position, if they wanted to buy the property, they could make it happen on the floor, and Wayne and Tina were there to assist them. Now the owner on the other side of that knew exactly the same scenario. And I think that makes all the difference. I think if we try to allude that there's multiple bidders and there's other parties that are there, then the buyers start to get a little bit hesitant.
Of course, and authenticity and transparency is the McGrath way, and it's definitely the foundation that our culture is built upon. So I'll give you, that's a really good learning for everyone there. And I'll give you an example of 2 auctions that I called for 2 different agents. So the first one, we turned up, there were a couple of registered parties. The owners' expectations were a little higher than where we thought the market was headed, but the bidding was quite competitive, and it reached a certain point where it did pause. Now it was only around 50-odd thousand below the owner's expectations. So at that particular point, the options were to either pass it in, negotiate, or to keep the auction live. Now my preference as an auctioneer is to definitely retain that intensity and keep the auction live. So a nice calm discussion was taking place where I asked the agent to come into the room, have a chat to the owner and say, the good news is that we've got a live bid. The other piece of good news is that live bid's not going to go anywhere. Is it at your reserve price? The answer is no. However, we're only 4% away from our ideal price. Now, 4% in today's market is within a sensible distance of your expectations, because we're not sure what the market may do in the next 60, 90 days. will it increase by 2%? Will it decrease maybe by another 5%? Is there that extra correction that maybe John has talked about, that we're in that 3/4 of that 2-year correction period? So there certainly wasn't any managing of expectations. There was chunking it down to a percentage rather than a dollar amount, where the owners are like, okay, well, 4%, that doesn't seem like a lot, and it's not meant to actually allude that we're not being transparent. It's full transparency. But and then the discussion to the owner was, what if we went up to the highest bidder because the underbidder looks like they're completely exhausted?
Yep.
Why don't we go up to the highest bidder, keep the auction live, and look to get an increase from that highest bidder, which will only make it within 2% of what your reserve price is, and at that point we can announce the property on the market. And if the other bidder decides to reactivate or get involved, then great. If not, then we're happy to get it sold at that point. Great advice, Adrian. Let's do that. We went out, got the increased bid from the buyer. We actually showed the reserve price to the buyer, that it was slightly above, so there was win-win for everyone. The owner knew that the buyer was coming up. The buyer knew, out of full transparency, that they were still buying at less than the owner's reserve price, despite them increasing their own offer.
Yeah.
And there was a compromise, and that's what auction is all about, is that a nice compromise. And we announced on the market, the hammer went down, and both parties were delighted.
Yeah, and do you think if you'd passed the property in, you would have had that same opportunity?
No.
No, and that's exactly the same as what the scenario I played out. It's an intensity, but it's a calmness.
Correct.
And the very best agents out there, like Wayne and Tina Vaughan, like your scenario on the weekend, it's a sense of calmness and having those direct conversations with authenticity and actually caring about the result, as opposed to just trying to get the transaction done. And we've all seen it, right?
Yes.
Now, the second scenario you had was a little bit different.
It was different. You know, I turned up as the auctioneer. I had a chat to the owner out the front, and the agent did brief me about the situation, that it's unlikely to sell. There's unlikely to be any registered parties, and the agent also briefed me that the owner's expectations were quite high. I'm talking probably 25% above market value. So I said to the agent, let me have a chat to the auctioneer as what can be seen as someone with some authority.
Yep.
And I think utilise our auctioneers team. So get them to call your vendors, get them to meet with your vendors, because we're certainly only trying to complement the great work you're doing. It's just that the marketplace sometimes can see us as a market authority, given that we're exposed to many auctions in any one day. So I had a good chat to the vendor and said, look, the price that you're suggesting, based on what the agent's feedback is, seems to be inconsistent from where the market is. And based on what the agent tells me, the property hasn't been a secret. We've had thousands of web views. We've had scores of people come through. There's been contracts issued. However, the offers are at around that early 2s. I know your expectations are in the mid 2s, and you know what? We'll continue to support that if that's your position, and if you're not interested in selling in this market, we totally accept that. Just talk me through where the mid 2s came from. So after a few moments, it seemed to be that the historical data or the comparables that the owner was using was in a completely different market perspective.
Right.
And I just happened to explain that recent sales are really only valid if they're really in that sort of 30, maybe 40, 42 days period. And I think the owner understood that, and before we got too much into it, you know, even the owner himself said, look, I would look to probably sell it around that 2.3 mark. I said, great, that's a really good position to put as an asking price, because you've got a lot of people here today that are going to want to know what the vendor bid is, which we declared it at 2.25.
Yep.
And I said at 2.3 asking price, we know that you're a seller at that particular point, and we're telling the market that if someone wants to pay more, great, there might be some competition. If not, it's a buy now price, if you like.
Yep.
So the only minimum standard which I'd like to remind everyone of is that particular auction, despite having no registered parties, there would have been close to 60 people come through. And guess what? Those people were all people that owned in the street or in the local area, because they received auction invitations.
Yeah.
Now, auction invitations are great. However, as you know, I'm a data freak, right? Auction invitations are great, owners coming through the open house or the pre-auction viewing, great, but not capturing data, insanity in my opinion. And I think we did it okay on that day. The agent did it okay, but they could have done it better. There was still people coming and going. They weren't positioned properly, in my opinion. I mean, in my opinion, they should be positioned out the front of the house, capturing everyone that comes in. Because this agent that was supporting was actually inside, so it wasn't as organised as I would have liked. So minimum standard, guys. Every single open for inspection or auction. Really need to make sure it's you and someone else there.
Absolutely.
And the auctioneer being able to talk to the vendor. So it really needs to be a minimum of 3 McGrath representatives as an auction, and a minimum of 2 McGrath representatives at an open for inspection. Really vital, and capturing data critical.
And again, I'm referring back to them, and because it is topical, Wayne and Tina Vaughan, they have their team members there. They have Stephen, they have Sam, they have multiple team members there at every single auction, and it's a prerequisite that people give their details when they're entering the property at an auction, and that person is actually at the front of the property. Now, the simple conversation is name, number, conversation, all on the iPad. And the reason why we're capturing that, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer or Mr. and Mrs. Onlooker, is the fact that we want to keep you up to date if something happens post-auction, or we want to talk about the result. Now, the majority, again, successfully excludes getting DLs before the auction invite, they're getting communication, they've probably been through the property multiple times during the course of the campaign. It's a natural way to have a conversation of value as soon as the auction finishes, whether it's sold, whether it's passed in, whether there's an asking price, or whether you're still negotiating, there's a reason to have that contact. And we always talk about adding value. And I think if we walk away with saying, right, if we're just going to talk to them or just call them and spam them or send them an email, that's not adding value. But if we're going to give them information that's going to help them make a decision in the future about the value of their home, whether they decide to sell or not, you need to add value. And by adding value, you're talking about that result.
Yes, definitely. And I just feel that the pre-auction viewing is probably the most important open house that you're ever going to conduct for that property. It's an opportunity to display your skill set both as an agent, as an auctioneer, and the result is less important. So whether it sells or not, obviously it's very important for the owner, but from a perspective of the market, the way we conduct ourselves, the way that we keep calm, the way that we keep professional, the way we make an announcement, whether it's a vendor bid or whether it's to disclose that there's no registered parties. However, here is, in terms of urgency, we've already agreed on an asking price. This is the asking price. I'd like to let everyone know. It's going to go online this afternoon, because what I have found in the past, agents don't agree on an asking price with their client until Tuesday, then it doesn't hit the web till Thursday. It's too late. I think super urgency, you're going to have to agree on a fixed price at some point, have it that day, get it online that afternoon, send an email out to all your email inquiries that afternoon for anyone that missed out. I mean, the amount of properties I've sold just by doing that, where someone's emailed back going, right, I actually viewed it or inquired or sent an email week 1, so maybe, close to 5 weeks ago, I didn't think it was in my price range, or my finance wasn't ready. Okay, now it's for sale with a buy now fixed price. Great, send me a contract. I'll come through and have a look next week. So that's urgency. And by Monday, you could have offer and acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, there you go. Well, Adrian, I think episode 41, such value add, because it's so topical right now. There's a lot of buyers, and I think it's fair to say, a lot of buyers are now attending those auctions. People are wanting to know. They've seen the media articles, they're looking at the news, they've seen the Royal Commission, all these types of things that have been happening outside of our industry. People have really got an ignited interest in knowing what's happening in the property market.
So
those little tips and tricks that Adrian spoke about, that I spoke about regarding the auction process, regarding an open for inspection process as well, exactly the same rules apply. They will set you ahead of the rest of the competition. And remember, this year, 2019, is about outpacing, being more passionate, and really coming to the table with a new value set to stand out from every other agent in your market. And by doing those two things and following up and having those conversations, you're definitely going to be outpacing the market, which is going to show passion.
Absolutely.
Guys, to keep up to date with everything that is McGrath, make sure you jump on to the Skills Workshop email system. There's all there. All the emails come through. Episode 41. We're going to come with another episode next week, episode 42. Going to be more focused around the buyers again, because I think buyer management, 2019, we said it 2018, the tail end of the year. 2019, it's going to be even more successful. It's going to create that success factor. So to keep up to date, any questions at all, please feel free to email adrianbo@mcgrath.com.au, Troy Malcolm @mcgrath.com.au. Looking forward to seeing you all around the grounds. Good luck for those selling tomorrow. It's another big auction day.
Yes.
Good luck to those selling at Open for Inspections. Make sure you're showing the McGrath difference, the McGrath Excellence Standard. Thank you, Adrian. See you all soon.
Bye for now.